Okay, hello everyone. May I have your attention, please? We are beginning. I know people are trickling in right now, and we have several people watching from home, so thank you. I'd like to start off by asking a question. How's everyone doing today? Great. I love the engagement. The reason I wanted to start today with a question is because I want to promote the fact that today is all about you and it's all about engagement. So at the end of each session, which we will have 2 very fulfilling sessions, there will be a time for you all to ask questions. So I want to remind you in here to pay attention so that you can ask the questions you desire, and also those of us watching at home, please do the same. There will be a Q&A function in the app. So thank you all for being here. I'm excited to see all these faces, and I'm also excited to be bringing in participants and speakers who will be here. Now, we're gathered to discuss how NATO is working on improving generational diversity, empowering young people, and offering them more opportunities to get involved and make an impact, which I know we all want to do. You're going to learn about 2 major opportunities and 2 very competitive NATO programs that enable young people to contribute extensively to the Alliance's work. We have a significant number of young people of various backgrounds joining the discussion, as well as hiring managers and those in charge. So as I said earlier, this will be an open conversation, so I would like to ask those in the room and those who are coming in right now, as well as those of us watching online, to prepare questions so we can get to them at each session. Now, before we dive into our sessions, I would like to give the floor to someone very special who will open the event. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Carlo Borghini, the Assistant Secretary General for Executive Management at NATO. Thank you. Hi.
So, good afternoon to everyone. I have a piece of paper with me because it was a last-minute commitment, so I wanted to be sure to say the correct things. I'm really glad to be here with you. I will start with a sentence, and I will explain why. And the sentence says, make something cool and change the world. It's not mine. And I've had Joanna that is there and is helping me to organize these rich events and so on and so on. She put in my notes a reference to a guy called Jack Andraka. Maybe you know better than me. But his story is fundamentally that he had a loss in his family when he was 15. And he wanted to find a cure for the treatment. He has always an interest in science. And what he did after this, he said, well, I have an idea and I would like to explore. So he called different research centers and different places. And everyone said, no way, we are not interested. But one organization said, come in and test it. And effectively today we have one of the most impressive and non-invasive detection of pancreatic cancer that it comes from him. And comes from someone that opened the door and allowed a young guy with no almost experience, but a lot of interest in science, to come up with an idea. So we would like to be the lab that opened the door. And this is the reason why we have created these 2 programs, the YPP, the traineeship program, and we'll try to develop other programs. We are doing a lot of reaching out activities as part of our HR strategy, to bring in all the young generation, because we strongly believe the different contribution, the different generational contribution make this organization stronger, and we can work on innovation. And when we invite young people to reach our organization, the first thing we are learning to do is listening, because that's the most difficult thing. A manager is typically capable to say, well, to people, please do this. And often the consequence of this is because they don't want to do it. A leader doesn't say this. Inspire generation to do what they are not, or they were not imagining to do. And this is what we would like to be NATO. NATO should be a leadership organization into which we are inclusive, welcoming young generation, building upon the experience of all generation, and ensure that the collective knowledge we bring together will make us stronger, more capable, and capable to achieve our key objectives. And our key objectives are defense and deterrence for the 1 billion people that are part of the population of our alliance, of our 32 allied nations. So I think you have an interesting afternoon today to discuss about the role of youth in our organization. When you will come in, I'm pretty sure many of you will be part of it. The YPP colleagues are already there. You will face the organizational soloing, and you will have difficulties. It will not be easy. It's been the same for me when I joined 18 months ago. It's for everyone. But be reassured, everywhere in the organization, starting from my fellow ASGs, we are committed to support you. So if you have any problem, we are there for you, to listen to you. Thank you very much for your commitment. Thank you very much for your interest. And I hope to see all of you on board to make our alliance stronger. Thank you. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. It's really great to hear from leaders who not only are amplifying the fact that we should all be listening, but also that there is a way to get your foot in the door. And I think we're all going to experience today how we can make that work. And so without further ado, I would love to open up the first session, which will be all about the Young Professionals Program. It is now open for applications, and this is the third cycle of the program, which aims to attract and develop highly talented young professionals who are interested in accelerating their career through entry-level positions at NATO. So please join me in welcoming on stage 3 of our young professionals. We have Maria Krasova, Tiago Alexandra, Nikolai Kolev, as well as the 2 managers. One of them will be online, Dr. Coronado, and of course, Captain Steve White. Come on over. Now, Maria, if you want to sit here, so we get a little bit of gender diversity. There we go. Okay, so now I'd like to just give everyone's titles. So we have Captain Steve White, Branch Head, Digital Strategy and Policy, NATO Digital Staff. Welcome. Online, joining us online shortly, will be Professor Dr. Sergio Coronado, Chief Information Officer, NSPA. Maria Krasova, who is in the middle right here, YPP Officer, NATO Digital Staff. We have Tiago Alexandre, right here next to me, YPP Officer, NATO Office of Resources, and Nikolai Kolev, YPP Officer, Communication Services, Public Diplomacy Division. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you so much. And now this is important to have 3 YPP who are actually graduating this year shortly, as well as 2 hiring managers, so we can get different perspectives. Now, I don't know if we have Dr. Coronado yet online, do we? No? Okay. Then it looks like Captain White, will you take it away? Oh, there we go. I'm so sorry, Captain White. Now we do have Dr. Coronado. Can we hear you?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
wonderful. Okay, please take it away.
So first, welcome and thank you for inviting me to share a little bit my experience. And Sergio Coronado, I'm the Chief Information Officer in the NATO Support and Procurement Agency, which is located in Luxembourg. The primary role is to support nations in acquisition, sustainment, and operations activities. And my experience has been excellent in supporting the program and having one YPP which worked for me about a year ago in innovation, different things around different theory, about AI, and it brought to us really, really challenging new activities. Some data that we have in NSPA in Luxembourg, we are about 1,500 people, and our average age is 47 years old. And I'm on the upper side of that experience. So we really need support from the younger generation to bring not only ideas, but bring a different view of the world, which us, as we are here in our organization for many years by myself, we tend to forget and we tend to close our eyes to the world out there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Double applause. Thank you so much, Dr. Coronado. Now, Captain White, I would love to speak with you a little bit about your experience with how youth have really impacted the work that you see and also in developing NATO's future.
Okay. When I arrived to this job in NATO a couple of years ago, I asked a younger employee if she would be okay representing me at a particularly robust meeting. "Don't worry," she said. "I can hold my own against a group of grey hairs." I'm still not sure to this day how I feel about that comment, whether to be delighted at the level of confidence in her ability that this young professional instilled in me, or the shock at the fact that I had become a grey hair, or indeed a no hair. I'm on the NATO digital staff. We are a professional group of about 100 employees, of which youth is at the very heart of what we do. Young people bring fresh perspectives, innovative ideas, and unique approaches to every area of life. They infuse vision and vitality into their communities. Therefore, we, NATO, need them to bring these benefits to the workplace. Their active involvement in our organisational processes is crucial for promoting that innovation, creativity, and overall organisational performance. The youth of today has grown up in a digital age, surrounded by technology and globalisation. This exposure equips them with a distinct way of thinking, allowing them to approach challenges with a fresh perspective. And as someone said to me, rather wonderfully, they bring a rather fantastic naivety. Their inherent ability to adapt to new technologies and trends means they often come up with innovative solutions that might be overlooked by those with more grey hairs than others. NATO, as you all know, strives to secure lasting peace in Europe and North America, deterrence and defence. But what also unites us is our member countries' common values of individual liberty, democracy, human rights and the rule of law. And these shared values unite a diverse group of allies on both sides of the Atlantic. So let us take these commonalities and interrogate deeper into their social values of environmental issues, social issues and governance issues, which are more akin to the youth of today. Then I can demonstrate how we on the NATO digital staff are very much at a social hub of standardisation, processes, collaboration and interoperability that needs youth at the very core of its development. For the environment, we advocate green IT. We have overarching policies that deliver simple working practices that guard us against lower level paper waste, through to the unnecessary waste of data duplication, and now NATO is in the nirvana of capitalising resource with cloud environments. We have written policy for green artificial intelligence. AI uses drinking water. At all times in the digital environment, we have to ensure we retain a climate conscience. Google's US data centres consume 12.7 billion litres of fresh water for on-site cooling each year. And you're all aware of ChatGPT. Well, a conversation on ChatGPT, 20 to 50 questions, uses that amount of water every time. We are heavily involved in NATO's biotechnology strategy, where allies and NATO commit to ensuring that applications of its use will be in accordance with the principles of responsible use, safety and security and sustainability. And lastly, with the environment, what about quantum computing for energy efficiency? Given current trends, the energy use of computation will continue to increase. Computing power required for cutting-edge large AI models doubles every 3 to 4 months. One proposed solution to this is quantum computing. And one of our tasks allocated to a junior staff officer is to assess the positive energy efficiency implications of quantum technologies by mid-25. Moving on to social. The use of social networks in operations is more and more at the fore. Indeed, you may know about Ukraine's current expert use of social networks for intelligence gathering. Of course, social networks are something that the younger generation are maybe more alive to than those of us more senior. We are now advocating increased social awareness using non-military actors, including industry, academia, as well as the general public being able to have a voice. And we are heavily invested in developing data sharing ecosystems that are enablers for this. The last of the three is governance. How are our young professionals affecting governance? We in NATO are actively working on understanding the implications of supply chain issues. Recent events in the Middle East easily demonstrate the importance of knowing your supply chain. We in the NATO digital staff are taking it beyond the physical hardware aspects, and my team are investigating the implications of the supply chain when we talk about generative artificial intelligence. Do we trust the algorithm? My team has set up a strategic foresight analysis framework. Essentially, we look to see what is coming over the digital horizon. We are looking at not next generation, but the generation after next. Next generation for a military tank is around 20 years away, but the generation after next for your iPhone is Thursday. And I have a junior team that's researching the move from 5G to 6G, the next version of ChatGPT that moves beyond just words with multimedia. And we're now even considering the input of a chip on your brain and the ethics behind it. More traditionally, we're also heavily invested in the electronic spectrum management. The spectrum is a finite resource stretching from submarine communications, utilizing LF through to SATCOM, utilizing the X-band in space. The proliferation of technology means we can cram large data into smaller spaces, and it all needs strategy, policy, management, and control. Finally, I was at a conference where the key speaker was Ukraine's Minister of Digital Transformation, where he actually said the words along the lines of, "We got rid of a lot of dead wood and recruited the brightest, most exciting youngsters to be involved in our transformation. Develop an innovation and then get the youth to be the red team and attack the hell out of it. It brings results." And I'll leave you with one final thought. Do we need digital solutions to change our culture, or do we need culture to change digitally? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I knew you'd leave us with a stumping question. Thank you so much. That was so interesting. And I just want to note before we get on to the young professionals that you just heard from 2 hiring managers. So any questions that you might have in order to get into the YPP, just keep that in mind that you have an opportunity now to ask those questions to the hiring managers. Thank you so much. Okay, now I'd love to get to the youth. All right, so now just to remind everyone, we have Nikolai Kolev, the Communication Services Public Diplomacy Division. Nikolai, I'd love to start with you with my first question. Can you talk a little bit about the recruitment process for the YPP? How did you prepare? What was it like?
Yeah, sure. So that was a very long process. I mean, they always tend to be in NATO because there's a lot of people applying. There's a lot of rounds you need to go through. There's security clearances that you need to get. But in this case, I think there was especially many stages because there were so many candidates. I think it was probably the biggest recruitment that they've had. I'm looking at colleagues from HR who I think have told us some good numbers on that before. So it took a very long time. I think it took the better part of a year to get through all the stages, and there were many iterations. And at least in my case, I hadn't really done a NATO recruitment process before, so I didn't quite know what to expect. But I would say, you prepare your CV, you prepare. With the information that you can find on the website. One thing that I would flag for people wanting to apply to any NATO jobs is just read that framework because it's competency-based, so you have to be able to give examples of work that you've done or situations and how you react in those situations, really to be able to underline how you react in situations and how you contribute to solutions. So that is something that I was doing, even as I didn't know too much about the process. And then it was about getting through the stages, waiting, which can as well be quite gut-wrenching sometimes. That was more or less the process.
Beautiful. And Maria, you are the YPP officer for NATO digital staff. So, in a similar line, of course, the recruitment process was very long. What would you say were some of the challenges that you kind of had to overcome for the application process, and what tips would you give those who want to apply?
So I think the good questions, first of all. For me, I think one of the biggest challenges was preparing for more the structure of the selection process. So as we know, NATO's got a fairly standardized interview and selection process. So what I did is, or the way I prepared for that, I sort of reverse engineered my job description or the path I was applying for. And I researched quite a bit about from the individual bodies. I read their strategic documents, their outputs over the last year, and then I developed, this is going to sound very geeky, but I literally sat down with a timer. I came up, with essay questions, and I would sit there for hours on end answering those essay questions to see that I could develop or write a coherent, consistent, for example, a written test in the space of 2 hours. Do the same for the higher view or the video interview, for the panel interview, and it was just doing that on a very regular basis to almost train that muscle, so to speak. So that was my method of preparing. I'm fairly certain others would have had maybe more relaxed, maybe even stricter approaches. So for me, it was the time pressure and then being able to organize my thoughts coherently and deliver that in a way that I think that NATO hiring officials or panels would have appreciated.
I mean, I think that's great advice, and that probably is baseline geeky, if you would call it, because it is a very competitive program, and so you need to be that way. And so thank you for sharing, and I applaud how smart you were in your thought process, and that's sort of the point of what we want to highlight here. Now, Tiago, you are the YPP officer of the NATO Office of Resources. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about this program. There are 3 years where you are part of a different team at NATO for each year. So I want to ask you if you could describe that experience a little bit, and also if you thought the 3 years was too short or too long or just right, like Goldilocks.
Just for awareness, so the first year I was in NSPA, where actually Mr. Coronado comes. He's now right now, even though it was not my hiring manager. And then I was in NCAA in Mons, in Belgium. And then my final year is right here, where I am now at NATO HQ. The 3 years of the program, it's a bittersweet feeling. So what happens is that during 1 year you get to learn the organization, you do what you have to do in your functional area, and eventually you learn, and at the end of 1 year you feel, now I'm really prepared to address a lot of the things that that I didn't know in the beginning, but now it's time to leave. So I think it's a bittersweet feeling. At the same time, you're looking forward to the next location at the same time. But that's exactly what the program is about. So you try to extract as much as you can for 1 year of that NATO body specifically. One recommendation that I have is that regardless where you are in the functional area, you have a YPP badge, let's say, and most of the hiring managers or your manager locally, it will understand, at least in my case, I don't know, I expect also the case of my colleagues, I had the freedom to go out and reach to other sections of the NATO body, and with that learned quite a significant amount about the organization in itself and what they do. I think that's a very valuable it's very valuable knowledge in NATO, as any other organization, I imagine.
I mean, I think it's true. It does take at least a year to get your bearings in anything. So I can imagine it being bittersweet that just when you're about to take this on, you have to move on to the next. But it ups your experience by 3 times, which is great. Now, since you all have different perspectives, I'd love to go down the line and I will ask a couple of questions. I'd love to start with you, and then Maria, you can take it over, and then Tiago. So, Nikolai, I'd love to know, what were your main takeaways from this program and from this experience?
So, a difficult question because
I know.
you've had so many different experiences over 3 years. You've moved in 3 different places. You've lived in 3 different, I mean, in my case, 3 different countries. You've worked sometimes in different functional areas because in my case, so my path was strategic communications and marketing. Now I work more on the digital side of communications, but in my, for example, in my second year, I was in the military command, and there I worked more on the strategic long-term planning, and that's very different to what I do now. And in my first year, I was also at NSPA in Luxembourg, where I was working partially on HR matters, but also partially with the front office or the cabinet of the general manager. So really a very, very diverse set of experiences. And I think it's, for me, the takeaway is, one, seeing the dots that connect the NATO enterprise and all NATO bodies. I think, at least in my case, it was very beneficial to see how NATO functions on the agency side, from the military side, and now that I am in HQ, to see the political and public diplomacy aspect of it, which really I feel gives me a 360 view of NATO and how it works. And that is something that I feel I can add value on a daily basis. It's not just about connecting people from my current job or previous jobs. That does happen quite a lot, but it's also about sometimes seeing the bigger picture, and it is a discussion which I think we've had sometimes, that in any other situation where you change 3 jobs in 3 years, people would say, well, is there something wrong with you? Why are you constantly changing job? That's kind of suspicious and a red flag. But in our situation, it's a bit of a good excuse, but we're going around an accelerated pace and really learning about the organization. And then we can give back and add value much faster. So I would say this has been my main takeaway, but also I've learned a lot about myself and about resilience, and about being able to juggle sometimes different projects related to the program, projects related to your daily job, thinking ahead to your move, because you're moving in another 3 months and you have to start thinking about where I'm living. So it can be sometimes a bit exhausting, but it's also such a rewarding experience that it's absolutely worth it.
Beautifully said.
I had to think about this one because I think in the question prompts that we got, it said, what are your key 3 takeaways? And I said, well, that's going to be a lot. So I'm going to focus on one of the biggest takeaways I've had. So I want to preempt this by saying that when we started the YPP and when we got, when we entered the program, it was very, very clear from the beginning that this was a 3-year definite contract, right? And that ultimately, in the end, we were competing for a position, and then afterwards, we would end up also continuing the competition process to find your home in NATO, wherever that may be. I find that my biggest takeaway is that you get a lot more done if you cooperate. So I don't think that either myself or Nick or Tiago here or any of the other YPs or any other colleagues who might be currently interns or temps that I work with on a day-to-day basis would have gotten as far as they've gotten if they didn't frequently and wholeheartedly support each other and help each other. The first thing that we did with our cohort of the YPs, we set up a monthly, round table. What are your challenges? What are your successes? Do you need help? Yes, I can help. How? And it transcended even just the practical considerations of, can you tell me, what's the best way to the move in the US? My first rotation was in Norfolk in the US. I had absolutely no idea if I needed to open a bank account or if I needed a car, how to do all of this practical things. So, and when I rotated in and then someone replaced me in the US, we absolutely shared that knowledge of how do you just get settled in a country, in a city, in the NATO body that is welcoming you. But it really transcends that. It goes back into, can you help me on this project? Hey, I was working on a policy, on a data-related policy. I needed a use case from a different NATO body. I reached out to Tiago. I said, hey, I know you worked with these guys. Can you put me in touch? done within 5 minutes, right? And that helps a lot. And that's the kind of environment that you need to work in and that you need to foster amongst yourselves, not just within the YPP cohort, but with all of the other, let's say, young professionals that you meet along the way. I understand it is competitive. I understand that not all contracts are permanent, and you might need to you might be ambitious and you might want to end up in better places than others, but ultimately knowing how to get people on your side and on your team is of much, much bigger value, but particularly as we look to some of the topics that the captain here was talking about, right? How do we move forward in an interoperable, in a cohesive way as an alliance? That starts in the workplace, that starts in your office, that starts with your leadership, it starts in your corridor and extends down to the building, and et cetera, et cetera. So maybe that's my naivete that I bring to the table, but that has certainly been my key takeaway, and I will stand by it.
I think that is so accurate, because I think, it seems that this is more than just the work experience that you get. This is the life experience that you get. And networking is a huge part of any field that you want to thrive in. So thank you for articulating that so well. Tiago, what are your takeaways?
So yeah, on the same line of Maria, pretty much, I had three main key takeaways. I'll focus pretty much there in line with Nick and Maria said, but I'll reinforce one, which is, so you have the opportunity during these 3 years to get to know a lot of people in a lot of different sections and areas. And I think especially in NATO, it's a large organization as many others, but especially in NATO, one motto that I would say is who and what do they do? And I think in every location that I've been, I've tried to do this first during the first 2, 3, 4 months, is really knowing who do you need to reach out and what are they doing. And that will really help you along the way, regardless of your specific job, specific area. And this is one of the, I would say, the main key takeaway that I have from these 3 years, besides having done specific projects or having done certain tasks. I think this doesn't come written anywhere, but it's something that you learn along the way. And I made sure I learned it quite early. And yes, so. Who's who and what do they do? I think you need to look for, because at the end it will all connect together. Even though people might be working on something that influences your work on a daily basis, and they just don't know. So it's. Yeah.
It's not always that everyone knows what they're doing in life, but everyone who knows who to ask for what, that's always helpful. So I'll start with you now, Tiago. I'd love for you to tell us what you're doing now and how this program has sort of affected your unique lens that you're looking through what you're doing now, as well as the future.
So currently, I'm not within the program anymore. So I was pretty much it's pretty much the end, and I applied to a more permanent position in the same office. So I'm at the NATO Office of Resources, and these maybe will ring a bell for some of you, or if not now, eventually in the future, if you are part of the organization. And what we essentially do there is that we provide an independent and integrated advice to the main resource committees of NATO. And so with that optics in strategic capabilities. So you imagine military capabilities, and also part of those are on the digital side. And so what we do is that we collaborate with the countries come to us, or nations, or even implementing entities such as NCAA or NSPA, and they submit certain projects, or they come for advice what to do. And then we go to the decision, to the table where the nations are, and we make our recommendations, and based on those recommendations, the nations decide. So these 3 years, how did they contribute to that? So first of all, I was in NSPA, and I acquired quite a significant amount of experience with deployable equipment. It's very specific. So my path, just to clarify, is engineering, logistics, and supply chain. And that helped really a lot, because NSPA, as another NATO body, has a lot of relations with a lot of their work, or a significant amount of their work touches with ISNOR and eventually the nations. And then I went to NCAA, where I had more of an exposure to this technology side, let's say communication systems and so on. So they really, the path was very well designed, and I thank all the HR team and whoever did that, to the fact that I built up a certain blocks of knowledge that really capitalized at the end. The path really made sense, and that was great, and I'm still reaping benefits out of it.
And you will for some time.
Yeah.
Maria?
I'm trying to remember the question.
I was just going to say, do you want me to ask? So basically, what are you doing now, and how has YPP affected that, as well as the way you look at your future?
Sure.
And your
All right.
path.
So, for background, I'm completing now the Emerging Technologies and Innovation track. So I started with Allied Command Transformation in the U.S., working for the innovation branch, and my first project was as a product owner of a minimum viable product that dealt with, or tangentially related to, exchanging data in federated environments. So what am I doing now? I am working on data exchange in federated environments, but from the perspective of digital standardization and interoperability. So actually, my track was also very well designed, but I also did go out of my way a little bit to maintain, let's say, coherence, or a little bit of that red thread. So I stayed with a big portion of my project across all 3 years. Actually, I sort of carried it through. I made the case with my hiring managers, my line managers, my supervisors to allow me to work on that, to release some funding, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how that contributed, and I think it was great, because I sort of started small in the innovation space, sort of going fast, developing something very quickly, testing it out, and then I could see I moved through to NCIA. I moved now through to NATO Digital Staff, where we really focus on, well, how do we bring that innovation in as actual capability to the alliance, and unfortunately, it's not so easy as you would necessarily, in the commercial world. You really need to think about thinking in advance. How do we standardize solutions? How do we bring in interoperability as a technical requirement, as a requirement on the level of organization, of policy, very early on into the design phases of our capabilities. So usually when I mention that I'm working on for data exchange or data standards, people's eyes glaze over, but I genuinely enjoy it. Just now, before coming into this room, I was carried away finishing. We're working on a next standardization task, or a standardization problem that tackles the problem of how can we exchange trained machine learning models independent of the environment in which they were trained or developed. How can we enable that? So now we're thinking about not just sharing data, but actual machine learning models that you can then deploy. And if it's standardized, then we are all using or relying on similar data exploitation analytics. So my current role, and to answer your question, I think in a very long-winded way, I am staying with the NATO digital staff with digital standards and interoperability for at least the next 3 years. So I'll be able to see, let's say, the fruits of some of my labor, hopefully, because we write policy and we write directives, and now it's about seeing that implemented within the NATO enterprise, within nations, and see where it takes us. So there you go.
I think it'll also take us far. And Nikolai, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and what your hopes are for the future that paves.
Yeah, sure. So now, I think I mentioned a bit earlier that my path is strategic communications and marketing. I mentioned that I rotated through the NATO Support and Procurement Agency in Luxembourg, and then Allied Joint Force Command Brunsum, where I was working on in their strategic communications section. And now finally I work in the public diplomacy division here as a digital outreach officer. And basically the work of the public diplomacy division is it's quite far-reaching, but it's, for example, events like this, and that is not only organizing events. This particular event is co-organized as well with the executive management division, which for the people who don't work in the building is basically our HR division. But also they organize many other events like this. We have as well a broadcast team, which are the wonderful people who are filming us and bringing this to the online audience. We also have a press section. We have a section which deals with digital content, the NATO website, social media content production, as well as the messaging. And this is as well the section which works on the NATO website. This is actually the team in which I work now, but I work from the perspective of planning and coordination and synchronization. So that is taking into account the longer term, let's say, map of what is upcoming, what are other NATO bodies or entities doing, what is happening in the world, and really trying to be more strategic about it. Sometimes that is, specific campaigns that we do, be it support to Ukraine, be it looking at assurance and deterrence messaging, on military exercises or so many other things that the division does. And actually, I'll be staying on for another 3 years in this division, doing basically a similar role to what I'm doing now. And yes, I'm very much looking forward to it. And every day continues to bring new and interesting experiences and things to learn. And yeah, I'm excited for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nikolai. Well, I'd love to open it up to the audience for questions now that you have heard about the different areas of expertise and growth that we have in front of you. Are there any questions? Feel free to raise your hand and we'll have a microphone passed to you. And in the meantime, just feel free to raise your hand. And in the meantime, I will continue to ask my questions because I have many. So feel free to just raise your hand at any point and I will call on you. Okay? In the meantime, I would love to know if there was one particular experience for all of you, as a manager as well. I'd love to know your take on this. Was there one particular experience that you think sets your role in the YPP apart from sort of any other entry-level experience that someone might have at NATO? Feel free, whoever wants to chime in.
I can go first. I hope they'll address the question, but I'll share one experience that I had, which, so for context, I didn't come from a military background, even though in NATO, it's a lot of the cases, so you have we have military and you have a civilian side, and a lot of the civilians somehow at some point have had their military experience in their careers, which is not necessarily the case, but it's in a lot of cases it happens to be so. In my case, I always wanted somehow to contribute to the forces side, and I never had, as I said, I've never been there, so I don't know a lot of the things that go on and so on. But last year, particularly last year, I was given the opportunity to participate in a military exercise in NATO, where there are civilians working, and that was for 3 weeks, and I was deployed to 3 different locations. So that was an experience that I really, it was a really great experience. I never imagined that I would do that during these 3 years, in fact, and it was quite unique. I don't think I would ever have the opportunity to do that if it wasn't in the context of NATO, and maybe not even in the context of the YPP. It really depends on your position. So that was really great.
That is incredible. Yeah. Was that part of your input, Captain White?
I was going to sort of say, if you walk around this building, you can see how through the photos, from the black and white photos, and how youth over the years, the average age of NATO has come down and down and down. And I was saying to you before we started that I'm a Cold War dinosaur. But I joined up, the military that I joined was very much representative of the society that I came from. And I think what NATO needs now is to take you guys and be representative of the society that you come from. And that is very, very important. And the other thing that I was going to say, I love the fact that if you've got the solution, that you're going to give us the money and you're going to shout about it once it gets out there.
Yeah.
And the fact that that network, how that network comes together, I mean, I don't know. I'm almost a flibbertigibbet, you know. We have these NATO civilians. I come in with my 3 years ideas and good ideas, but you guys provide consistency, and I love the network that you bring. So if I got a question, you've got a friend in such and such a division or in a such and such agency that can help us out, and that network is really something
That's
else.
what makes the world go round, whether it's a
Exactly.
small world, a big world. I know we have a question over there. Can you please introduce yourself and your question?
Thank you very much. My name is Mariam from Youth Atlantic Treaty Association. So my question is, sometimes there are people from older generation, they are a bit skeptical, for example. And my question would be, have you faced this kind of skepticism? And if so, how you would try, or did you handle this? Thank you.
Great question.
I'm happy to jump in.
Sure.
I mean, this was my day number 1, I have to say, because I was sitting next to a briefing room where I think a bunch of the directors were meeting, and the director of the division where I was at said, "Okay, we have the young professionals starting, and you know, it's the first time, exciting times." Literally after the meeting, I had 2 guys pop their heads, like, "Oh, so you're the one? Well, you think you're gonna like it? You think you can contribute?" So it was a bit of a condescending conversation, but I could feel that it was also a challenge. It gave us notice. Not that I think any of us would have gone into any of our jobs demotivated and not wanting to show our best, but it really, I think, made me even more focused to not only do well at my job, but to be able to show people that you can come from the outside and bring change, and you can bring good ideas, and you can adapt in a way to the system, but also start changing the system or contribute to the work and the goals of NATO. So in that sense, I think we have been able to take on that, and I think very rarely has it been as blatant as that. But it was very interesting that it happened exactly like that on my first day. But I think we have been facing that situation many times over, all of us, as we've been rotating through the different NATO bodies, and it's been, I would say it's been something that we've been successful in changing minds.
Can I also jump into this question, because it's a good question, and I think so I've worked. I had this experience of working in one of the military commands in the command structure. So you're, on the one hand, you've got a difference in age. You've got a difference between the military and the civilian, and also there's a little bit of a gender imbalance. So I came in with, you know, all 3 boxes ticked, and that I've definitely had experiences where that came through very obviously. So I'll tell you very briefly. I was, let's say, brainstorming ideas and asking questions, and one of my supervisors, who is an older person, who's an older man, very publicly yelled at me. He yelled at me, he shut me down, and he left the room. And that was the end of the meeting. And this was, I think, month 3 or something. And it was difficult. It was difficult to handle, to manage that. Very, very luckily, I had a few things that on my side. One, I had a very trusted and very close team of coworkers and also supervisors. I immediately came out. I told them what happened, and they sat me down. He said, "Maria, you tell us, what do you want to do? Do you want to continue working on this project with this person, or do you want to call it quits? And if you call it quits, we will pull you out, and we will actually pull out our entire team, our entire involvement from this project. We are behind you 100%. This I'm extremely grateful for to this day, because I think my leadership and my supervisor really stood up for me in that context. And I said, no, you know what, I believe in the project. This is, this is digital transformation. This is in line with what I'm interested in. We're going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And the second thing that happened is that I succeeded. Sorry, but the project succeeded. It worked. And there was another there was another female mentor who worked in the building. She was quite a few ranks above me. And at some point we were having this also a similar conversation, similar as we're having here. And she said this line, she said, "You have to become so good they can't ignore you." Right? And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. I don't know if that's if that's positive or if that's a toxic way of looking at it, but it is one way to make yourself, let's say, known and visible, whether you're coming from an age disparity, whether you're coming from a gender disparity, or maybe from an idea disparity. Sometimes you're just getting too big and too bold. And if that's the case, prove your point. Do the legwork, prove your point, bring it to the table, and if it doesn't work, you pivot, you bring something else until you are there, until they can't ignore you. And of course, maintain a network of trusted people who've got your back in case things go south. And just to close this person and I, with whom we had this conflict, we ended up smoothing things over, we mediated, and we became very good colleagues afterward. We continued working together for at least another 2 years. And it was very resourceful, let's say, an interaction and project. So there you go. That's
and I think it's, those are important lessons, unfortunately hard, but important lessons that the earlier you learn, not only what you're capable of yourself, but also of what can happen, and the fact that you raised it and persisted, and now look where you are, that's really important. So thank you for sharing that. I do want to get to our next question, which is right here.
Hello, my name is Armin. I am from a high school organization in Romania. We are organizing model NATOs. And my question is, do you think that you need a specific major for going inside YPP program, or maybe an age restriction? And also, what was the toughest thing you faced in YPP?
Maybe if one of you want to address.
Okay. So I think depending on the path that you're selecting, for sure, if you have, and that might be one of the requirements, I'm not aware of all of them, that you major in what is being asked is important. But don't forget that it doesn't need, I expect that it doesn't need to be exactly to the letter what is being written there. Because you'll be assessed on a lot of the experiences when you make your applications, you fill the questions, and so that is counting. Of course, if you're a doctor and you're applying to digital marketing, maybe it's not coinciding, but maybe you have a digital marketing experience that is valuable, and still go for it. The major, picking on the major challenge, well, for me the major challenge was after being at least going for the first selection process, or I've been selected to undergo now the recruitment process. It was the final interview, but I guess that is to expect, because you've invested a lot of time, you've gone through all the other processes and so on, and now it's the big deal. So and that is probably the one that I found the most challenging. So picking up on some of the things that were said before, just prepare. Practice makes perfect. And one tip for maybe the application is that there are certain competencies that you see in there, and make sure you address those and you bring those to the interview. I think I would pick that. So
Wonderful. And Captain White, I'd actually like to, after you answer, address another question to you.
Just on that one, as an employing person that's recruited a couple of people into NATO, it's your ability to demonstrate, not necessarily the YPP. PP might be a little bit more specific. But if you're looking at other roles to come in, it's not necessarily what your base degree or your major is. I've got someone working on quantum computing who hasn't got an engineering degree. It's their ability to demonstrate. They may well have had a hobby of quantum computing every time they went home. You know, it's the ability to demonstrate and answer the questions and be able to show the panel or the interviewers your ability to answer questions, your ability to analyze, your ability to think about the subject matter that you'll give them. So the fact that you've done a major in a particular subject demonstrates your educational ability. You may be able to take a different subject outside of that and really investigate it, analyse it, etc., and produce a policy or a product against it.
Captain White, I'd like to ask you sort of a two-parter question from some of our viewers online. Thank you so much for submitting. One of them is basic, and we all want to know. There are so many applicants. How do you stand out? And then the second question is, which I think is interesting, having worked in various roles across NGOs and international organizations in conflict areas, I've had to adapt to many different responsibilities, from managing budgets and ensuring security to handling communications and logistics. This interdisciplinary skill set is often difficult to fully reflect in applications for specialized roles. So how does NATO's YPP program recognize and value candidates with this kind of diverse experience, where a wide range of skills is required to succeed in challenging environments?
Wow.
Sounds like they're a pretty good candidate.
Yeah. So the first one's relatively easy. Making yourself stand out is by being you. But also read the question. If it says 150 words, use 150 words. Think about it. Utilize the space that you're given wisely. I've just sifted through 60 candidates for a particular role, and it was easy to get down to the top 8 because they'd put some thought into the answer. You know, what do you know about NATO? It's an easy question, and some people just cut and paste. You know, it's put some effort into what, if you want it, put some effort into it. That's the first point. I think that's all I will ask. Put some effort into it and think about it and be you. The second one's very difficult across a YPP organisation that's so diverse.
It's basically, how do you reflect the breadth of work and experience that you have in an application?
In a?
An application.
Yes.
And is that important to you? I mean, maybe it's...
Well, sometimes it is. It depends on the role that you're going for. YPP, I'm not sure. Maybe, I don't know what you were actually asked around the breadth of knowledge that you had to demonstrate, because you must have had to show quite a large breadth. Whereas some of my roles that I employ for are a little bit more specific. So I ask for 3 years experience in a particular field. And how do you demonstrate that? Now, that can even be demonstrated through your research program. That could even be demonstrated by, like I say, an Estonian female teenager in a bedroom may have had a project developing something that was utilizing a particular technology. So it doesn't have to be an official demonstration through a professional role. You might be able to demonstrate it outside of that. It depends on how broad you are as a person, or whether you just stayed within the lines to get there. And that then goes back to how do you stand out in a job applications. Those people that can demonstrate that breadth will then stand out.
Wonderful. Is there another question here? Oh, right there.
My name is Karim Ajami, and I'm also part of the organizing team of the Model NATO conference. What trait do you think is the most important to have as a young person entering the YPP program and want to get recruited? And what do you think was your trait that made you stand out in front of other people joining this program?
I'm happy to jump in. I think it's about agility. I think it's about reactiveness and being quick on your feet, because it doesn't mean that you have to have all the answers, but sometimes you just need to be able to react and to know what are the steps that you need to take, to be able to turn to the right people, and this is where I go back to, for example, Tiago, who said, it's really important to get to know the people, because sometimes you know the process, or sometimes you can read the process. Sometimes it's about just learning and getting to know. So it's really about hitting the ground running, having initiative, and just having a plan for any difficult situation of how you can basically tackle any situation and anything that comes your way, because there will be a lot of things that call you into fast reaction, and you'll need to show agility.
Wonderful. I know that there are more questions. Now that we've warmed up, the audience is ready for questions, right? That's always how it goes. But that's okay, because there will be a reception later, and so you're able to ask questions. Keep those in mind. But for now, I would love to give a wonderful thank you and round of applause to Captain White, Nikolai, Maria, and Tiago. Thank you so much. Thank you for your insight. Thank you all. Now, if you want to walk off the stage now as I introduce, thank you very much. Now, it's time to introduce the next session, which I'm very excited about because it holds a special place for me. Actually, last time, if you all want to come in as I kind of introduce you and also introduce what the session will be about. Marie-Doha, if you want to come start. I had the opportunity to host the NATO Youth Summit in May in the United States, in Miami, Florida, and that's sort of where the inception began of announcing what this next program is. And so that is why I'm very excited to see it take shape. I'm referring to the NATO Youth Advisory Board, which the NATO Public Diplomacy will launch soon. So this is very exciting. I have to lead us off and to kick us off Marie-Doha Besanceno. It's so nice to see you again. She is the Assistant Secretary General for Public Diplomacy at NATO. We also have Sophia Wallace. It's lovely to see you again. The Program Associate for the International Partners at Aspen Institute. We have Robin am I saying this right? Staspole. Robin Staspole, AI Policy Analyst at the Future Society. And Marie Magdalena Bradova, student at King's College, London, and policy intern at the Milken Institute. Thank you all so much for being here. I'd love to first give the floor to Marie-Doha. This is coming from you and your team, and we're really excited. This is the pilot program. It's the first time it's launched. So can you talk a little bit about what it is, what the Youth Advisory Board is, who you're looking to, what an ideal and eligible candidate would be?
Thank you very much. Indeed, this is very new for us, but I think this is something we've been thinking about throughout the year. And even before the Youth Summit, as we were really trying to find topics which would resonate well with the youth, and we realized, but why don't we ask the youth directly instead of doing it ourselves? And indeed, one major step was having the Youth Challenge, reading the papers, having winners, and then having face-to-face engagements with you during the summit, very free, open discussions on expectations. What do you think of our communications? How does this resonate with you? What are the topics that you wish you were able to discuss that you didn't find? Or what are the topics that we keep discussing which you find too technical or too repetitive and I think this feedback was incredibly useful. And my goal is really, how do we embed this earlier on in the process, and how do we keep those channels open throughout the year and not only once a year when we prepare for the Youth Summit? So this is how it happened. And then there's a lot of very interesting initiatives and already communities attached to NATO, different places of this house. And one of them is the Women Advisory Board, which already exists with very incredible women who themselves either have an NGO or have civil society projects relevant to that topic and help NATO stay relevant. And I think for youth, this is probably something that was a little bit missing. And there are a lot of youth projects which are more looking at educating youth or bring them closer to NATO, or aimed at youth who are working on foreign affairs, public policy, who want to become NATO experts. I want to emphasize this is not what this is about. So we are not primarily looking for youth with PhDs on NATO. On the contrary, I would say, what I really, really appreciated with this group and discussions with you was the fact that you're coming from different walks of life, that you have an interest in security and defense, which comes from a very personal experience, personal discussions with your entourage, and have your own ways of contributing, which are all different. And I think this is what we are happy to bring into NATO, also very open to remarks and proposals, and maybe working groups together so that we can keep improving our engagements with you and answering the right questions.
And am I right in saying that it's all about finding those in different communities who sort of act as leaders or act as experts in a certain field?
Yes, definitely. I think we're not, once again, trying to educate anyone. I think it's the contrary. We want to be educated by you. And so please do bring in your field of expertise. So for that reason, we are looking for a diversity of fields of expertise. I don't know, I remember one of the young women in Miami saying that during the day she worked in fashion, but at night she was a cyber expert since she was 12 years old. I find that amazing. Yeah. And she was explaining how she's bringing her own personal interest in security, in cyber, to her colleagues in fashion, which matters equally to her. And I think this ability to build bridges is precisely what we are looking for.
And that, I think, is true for anyone at any stage in life. We all have these different layers, we all have different curiosities and different interests. So if you can sort of merge those, then that will make progress happen. Thank you so much, marie-doha. Sophia, I would love to ask you a question. So you actually led the Youth Council at the NATO Youth Summit. So I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about its process of selection and how the Youth Council sort of helps support the missions that you currently are working on with Aspen Institute.
Of course, and also lovely to see you again, Donna. So primarily the Aspen Institute works a lot on leadership and also just development of values, guiding these leaders into more just societies. And so part of that also includes younger leaders. And so that was always at the forefront of our planning when starting the 2024 NATO Youth Summit as co-host. So because we wanted to have youth at the forefront and not just have me as the one voice representing, we created a youth council with about 9 to 10 members from approximately 5 to 6 different Aspen programs in the United States that all focus on youth, some of which include leadership development, others that are including civil, just general advocacy work. And we really tried to make sure that we had a breadth of different representation with us in the Youth Council. So we had an age range of between 18 to 25 years old within those 9 to 10 members. A couple of them were with technology backgrounds, some with biology backgrounds, others that were just generally doing advocacy work, so very much different than what NATO is, and we thought that would be really useful to give us a much different perspective and a fresh perspective as to what the agenda might need for that summit. So we went about that way, had a couple of sessions with them, and really asked them to engage with us authentically, which could also mean getting pushback for some of the topics that we may have had, or just hearing their suggestions for maybe things that we're missing or speakers that we should include that we hadn't thought of before. So it was really interesting to be able to engage with them and also have that influence and essentially have that soundboard that helped us develop the agenda.
I was going to ask a little bit about that kind of sounding board because you are making the content more relevant to young audiences across the Alliance. Can you talk a little bit about how important that is, not only to amplify their voices, but for the future of NATO and the future of all the work that is happening between the two as well?
Absolutely. So one of the suggestions they had given us during this Youth Council was that we should do some sort of networking to allow the audience, because there were about 300 people in the Miami stage, and let them to interact with speakers, some of the NATO officials that were there, and we had not thought of that, and so we thought that was an amazing opportunity, especially during that one long day, to have those breaks and be able to have speakers come off stage, rotate throughout the day, and just see the smiles and laughs that were going on between audience members and these speakers. So that was something that we really appreciated from that we had not thought of before. And we also just enjoyed being able to just hear some of their other ideas. And I think one way we really want to keep them engaged too is we didn't want them to just come and attend the summit. We also wanted to make sure to include them, given that they also have a voice that should be uplifted. So a couple of ways we did that. We had one of our youth council members do kind of a social campaign for us, which was a day in the life. And we had our social media team basically follow her throughout the day and see what her perspective was attending the NATO Youth Summit. And along with that, she also got to have a closed door conversation with the Deputy Secretary of State, Kurt Campbell, which was really unique for her to be able to ask him questions that are on her mind off the record. And so that was a nice add for her. And then we had another youth council member who got to come on stage and address questions to former Secretary General Stoltenberg. So we really did want to make sure that we weren't just listening to them, but also uplifting that voice too, because we know that is critical.
Well, right, and as I mentioned, this we sort of got a sneak peek at this announcement for the Youth Advisory Board and Group at the NATO Youth Summit, which you also co-hosted through Aspen Institute. And I was curious, sort of between the two of you, what kind of commotion you heard about it in the early days, because I mean, it's not even open for applicants until early November. So how has that sort of excitement ignited and carried on over until now?
Well, I could begin that when doing the Youth Council, it was independently at first organized by the Aspen Institute, but we had asked the council for some of their feedback of how they would want to see NATO get further engaged, and one of them was continuing to have sort of a legacy council or advisory group which is being launched. So it really was amazing to see that NATO had taken that on and carried out that promise now with this announcement, and I'm sure it's very meaningful for them.
I think for us, it's just extremely consistent with the discussions we've been having for a whole year, which has to do with bringing communities closer to us. And youth is probably our number one community. And there are different ways of doing this. We work a lot with content creators, so we have the same. They happen to be young, but we also work with young think tankers. But I think this community is a bit different because once again we're not educating them about NATO, rather being very open to their own feedback and perceptions of what is it that we're doing. But so far, we kept it relatively secret, so no commotion yet.
Well, after this, I think there will be some commotion. And maybe in the audience? Are we already? Yeah. We're already ready. We're not ready for questions quite yet, but I know that there will be several of them after this conversation. Sophia, thank you so much. Now, Robin, I know that you were one of the Youth Summit Challenge winners. I'd love to just ask briefly what idea came to be that allowed you the opportunity to win so that people might kind of understand a little bit better what powers through.
Thanks for having me. So basically the idea I had was similar to the Youth Advisory Board, but I think a bit narrow in scope. Based on my background is something I suggested. So what I did suggest was the Digital Youth Task Force, basically to kind of empower the youth to kind of collaborate and to think about certain technologies which you can incubate. So basically to have these ideas and these narrow slices to be, these are the things which we can look at kind of developing. So for example, there was 4 things I put out as possible ways, like ways of boosting cyber resilience, for instance, in terms of AI-driven threat detection or VR crisis response training, trying to get youths to help with developing the ethics of emerging technologies, such as NATO's principles of responsible use, seeing like how the youth can be involved in coming up with an update to that, for instance, and for gamified diplomacy. So these are all like a bit more unique or innovative ideas, which I think the Digital Youth Task Force, or in this case, as has been taken forward in the Youth Advisory Group, to be brought to the fore, basically, to be incubated by the youth and with the help of NATO and, with the support of them. Thanks.
Well, it was clearly a great idea. But how do you think the reception by NATO will allow for initiatives like these, or the ones that youth would want to exhibit in the program, to be put into practice?
So I think what I kind of suggested was just a narrow slice of what could be done in a digital sense, for instance. And we have many different things which are being incubated at NATO. So for example, in the environment, you have all these people working as current policymakers in NATO. And this is what the board does, to kind of link these policymakers to the youth who have these ideas. And having that personal connection, having that direct flow of ideas, I think that's what the board will do. And I think that would be really, really useful to have that constant churn of ideas, and it really does help them come to fruition. And I think that's the real value there.
And I think, based off of what you do now as an AI analyst, how do you think, in terms of what you are seeing at work now and how you are experiencing life as a youth in this field, how do you think the two will be able to merge? And how do you think the two being both the involvement of the youth and the direction that the youth want to propose, as well as the other side of it, the reception from other members who will want to propel this sort of merging of the two worlds into one?
I think the unique value proposition of the youth is that we are digital natives. And in my field, in AI policy, in cybersecurity, that's where you have a lot of youths being very excited to shape the future, being very excited to work on these issues. And I think that's what energy we can capture. And I think the moment you take this and bring these ideas straight to policymakers, that's the value, and that's what this board can hope to achieve.
Very well articulated, well said. Thank you. Okay, and now Marie Magdalena, I would love to touch on your expertise, but also the fact that you are one of the Summit Challenge winners as well. So if you could just present what your idea was.
So great to be here. Thank you for having me. Very quickly, my idea was an app-based proposal, which would run for 30 days, and every day you would have a mini game come up, which would basically, the idea of it was to give the users really a robust toolkit for battling and tackling disinformation. It was mainly aimed at younger children and teenagers, because they are growing up in this 100% digital environment, and we need them to feel safe there. So it would come up every day, a mini challenge over the course of 30 days. Some of the games would be trivia-based, some would be purely disinformation-based, and some would be just fun and engagement to keep them going and engaged. And at the end, hopefully, they would feel ready to head on in the world.
Is there an area where you think NATO should further work to kind of combat those security and disinformation challenges?
Yep, definitely. And I'd like to pick up on something that Robin said. I think there are, when we think about youth and security and disinformation, there are these sort of almost two competing narratives. We have one where we say that the younger generation is so tech savvy and they understand and they can see disinformation quite naturally and organically, and they've grown up in this online space and they can navigate it very, very easily. But then we have the other narrative, which is that they are actually quite susceptible to disinformation and then to radicalization, because it often comes hand to hand, because they are growing up in this digital environment that is highly personalized, and very often a parent or a peer can't challenge it. And so I think the truth is probably somewhere in between the two, and I think that's exactly the space that NATO should occupy. And I think this is where the group can really come in, because they can present this information and really tackle disinformation heads on in a way that is engaging and interesting and is presented in a format and language that they really understand. I think talking about engagement, I think NATO in every generation needs to do two things. It needs to kind of inform about its mission, and then it needs to win supporters for it, because I think kids growing up, especially kids in the post-Cold War generation, I would wager that the understanding of the mission, is decreasing. And so you need to put across that collective defense is actually the most effective approach to security. And that's why I think that the group has extreme potential, because if you get voices that can get to you to audiences that NATO isn't reaching now, and you have great people that can do that, and as marie-doha said, that are not just security nerds like a lot of us on this stage, but that are normal and can and can speak to kids. I think it has tremendous potential both for the member states and the alliance.
I'd love to open this question up to any of you, but I'm curious, how do you think this youth advisory group will sort of allow for momentum among the youth? Because I think that that momentum can sometimes be difficult to spark. So how do you think this group will benefit that?
I can just jump in. I think from my experience, it seemed, going back to my point about the soundboard, they are able to talk to each other. They're able to talk about maybe some disinformation or misinformation that they've heard and kind of dispel that within the group. And I think with this advisory board, they will be able to just have mentorship, which I think is extremely important for that kind of forward momentum that you're talking about, especially connecting young professionals to someone who's already established and being able to have those opportunities to learn from them the best practices. So I think that will be huge.
I think for the momentum to be there, we also need to steer that group towards projects where they can actually make a difference and have an impact in a relatively short term. Yeah. Because if we focus on really long-term issues, which we have no chance to solve within 1 year, is going to be very discouraging to all of us. But I see so many quick wins, and what Maria Magdalena said resonates very well, and what you said also, Robin, with what is NATO's added value here? And I think we have an amazing community of researchers, which we do know we producing incredible content. Then we have more and more communities of content creators who have the impact because they have their own communities. And I think NATO is somewhere in the middle, trying to play its role as a platform, connecting those dots. I think this is what I can commit that we will provide to this advisory board is the relevance, making sure that whatever they will propose will really stand a chance of resonating very directly with the political discussions happening just behind us in the North Atlantic Council, because I think this is how we can keep the momentum. Yeah.
I think it's also interesting because the nature of an advisory board is someone who has had a lot of experience, right? And this is sort of not the inverse of it, but a way of saying, okay, to the youth, you have advice to share, and your life experience means a lot. And I think that is an interesting way of bringing this sort of new information to NATO. What are you hoping, marie-doha, to see exist that you hadn't seen prior with the NATO advisory board?
Well, first I have to say I'm a big believer in reverse mentoring, if that term even means anything. But the idea that someone younger can absolutely mentor someone older, and I think this is completely obvious. And especially as you mentioned, Robin, when you're talking about digital tools, about audiences who are digital natives, of course we have a lot to learn. So what do we aim? I think by structuring this approach and having a board which is closely related to us, that also means that we commit to spending enough time with them, providing them with access to the relevant experts and so on, we will be able to deliver on reasonable projects which they can proudly call their own. And the second thing I'm hoping to achieve is actually build that community in the long run. So what we're thinking about is a relatively limited board of advisors, precisely so that we're able to provide quality mentoring and quality and get quality reverse mentoring from them, but throughout the year establish those in-person connections. But then the next phase is, of course, how does this live on in the long run? Because when you have invested in people and they are also investing in us, how do we make sure that in their future work life or they can stay connected with us? And whether it's an alumni network of the NATO Advisory Board, I think this will be probably as important as the year that they will spend advising us.
And I know we have some very busy people on the stage, but is this, I guess this is a two-part question, is this something that you could see yourself implementing, being on this board? And then on the flip side of it, in terms of an ideal candidate, what kind of a time commitment are you looking for?
Yeah, so yeah, I would love to be part of this board. When I was contacted to be speaking about the board, I was like, that's a great way to learn about it, first of all, firsthand. But secondly, it would be lovely to kind of bring my expertise in AI and cybersecurity to talk about it, to learn how it functions within NATO, and to have that kind of project. And I think this ticks so many boxes, and I think that has like massive value both ways, and something I'd love to be part of.
Marie Magdalena.
I definitely echo Robin's points. I think one of the aspects that the group has to have is the diversity that the alliance itself have, in whichever shape or form that comes. I think coming from a Slavic background and a post-communist background, you still often think of NATO as the West. And so I think I would be honored to be a part of the group and show the Slavic kids that it is okay. That is not a big, Western thing far away, but we are part of this. We're celebrating 25 years this year. It's an amazing thing, and we should be feeling very proud of our membership there. So yeah, I would definitely be very, very interested. But as I said, I don't think it can just be security geeks. I think it has to be everybody from the walks of life.
Well, the good thing is that this is exactly how I would have described it. So full alignment here. Yes, diversity really, really matters. Geographical, of course, because their approaches are different, but also different walks of life, different traits. We do want geeks and youth interested in technology because we realize we have a lot to learn. But then we also like inputs from completely different environments. And then in terms of time commitment, I think today with all the tools that we have, we don't need to travel all the time. We can actually have very regular touch points without making it too complicated. We would actually like, of course, to create a team spirit and that sense of community. So we would meet in person, but then I'm thinking about something where we meet very regularly virtually. But I'm also thinking about maybe something where there will be synergies inside the sounding board, where 2, 3 people would love to work on one project because it's a joint priority for them, but they bring different views. So I think this, but of course we would really respect the time. But what really matters is that we have profiles who are themselves doers, so who would not expect NATO to tell them what to do, but who would also come with their own energy and willingness to lead those projects with us.
Yeah, that was beautifully said. And the thing is, I promised an open conversation, and we have more questions than ever coming in. So I would like to open it up, and I will, as promised, start over here with the question.
Thank you very much. My name is Mariam from US Atlantic Treaty Association, YATA. So we are facing this unjustified war in Ukraine. My question would be, do you think that this war changed attitudes of young generation towards NATO and security policy issues? I am from Germany, for example, and I observe that we have much more young people interested in NATO and this kind of matters. And for all of you, how do you try to support Ukraine? Because young people and whole Ukraine, of course, needs our support. Thank you.
Maybe I can start with the first part of the question. Yes, clearly. Actually, it's a personal story, but in my previous position before I joined NATO, I was also leading the comms team in a big company, and these were discussions I started having at work with my younger colleagues who were telling me for the first time in my life, I'm worried about a nuclear war. I didn't sleep last night. And I was working in an absolutely non-military environment in a regular corporate. So yes, you can tell it impacts people from all walks of life, and probably the youth who never experienced this and never asked themselves these questions. But I would also say it has, it can have the opposite impact, which is apathy. Feeling completely insecure and just wanting not to hear about this and focus on entertainment and just this global fear of this, in addition to climate change. What can we do? feeling very helpless. So yes, clearly more awareness and feeling that yes, we all security, collective defense, it's for all of us to care about. But then if we don't steer the discussions and propose ways to be useful, the possibility of this leading to apathy.
If I can quickly jump on, thank you for the question. That was great, and Slava Ukraini today and forever. No, I think I definitely get where you're coming from. My country was invaded by the Russian forces in 1968, but obviously I was not alive. I don't remember. But we always live with this wound that we have. And so when the war started, I was living in the UK, where I still live, and I felt this very visceral reaction towards it, which the English people around me just didn't feel as much because they don't have this experience. They haven't grown up with the same stories that I have. And so you see how some people are very affected by it and some just not as much because they think it's far away and it can never happen. But I've been, in my personal time, which I don't have too much of, but I've been trying since the beginning of the war. I do translations for the Embassy of Ukraine, of media and press briefings. So it comes late at night. I get to translate it from Ukrainian to Czech, and then it can go to the press in the morning. But I think, because I can't be there, but I try to do my little bit wherever I am from in the world.
A little bit more of an institutional lens for that question. So I'm on the International Partners team, which essentially manages and sustains the relationship between the 14 international Aspens around the world and the Aspen in the United States, one of which is Aspen Kyiv. They have been fighting for the past couple of years and have sustained themselves through innovative programming, doing programming in bomb shelters, supporting their community and really ensuring that they're there for their community, they're stepping in and they're still showing their leadership where needed. And so part of our role in the United States has been to help support the staff themselves, continue to operate that institution, and also helping from fundraising point of views and just still spreading that awareness to other communities.
Yeah, so I can give a perspective where I myself am not personally deeply affected by Ukraine in terms of materially, but I do see the landscape around me in Europe and in NATO and all these different institutions being shaken, being changed so vastly by Ukraine, right? And that's what I see, and that's what I think all of us contribute to directly or indirectly in our own ways. And that's something I think is a very personal thing, but does contribute to the bigger picture. And I think that's something we all do. Yeah.
Thank you all for your input on that question. Great question. I think I saw another hand right there. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Donna, and I'm from Romania. I wanted to go back a bit and to ask you something about the Youth Advisory Board. You mentioned the fact that you're looking also from people with different backgrounds and also people that are not entirely security geeks, so right? Mm-hmm. But also I wanted to ask you, how is the selection going to be, and how big are you planning to make this committee? Are you talking about a 20 people group, or are you talking about more like a 7 or 8 people? Thank you.
Thank you.
So the call for participants will be made public shortly, in a couple of weeks. We're talking about weeks now.
Early November.
Now that it's out, early November. And we're looking for a board probably around 10 people. And so this will be a lot of test and learning, right? But for the first year, I think 10 is very good. And this would work well with our commitment to follow that first cohort of young colleagues closely enough so that we're able to propose the kind of support that we want. Yeah.
Great question. I think I saw a couple more hands. Anyone? Oh, yes.
Hi, hello, Celine Newmans, Youth Atlantic Treaty Association. My question is about the diversity. So when we mention about this group and these elections, is it going to be only NATO member and partner states, or is it going to be a global call for everyone so that we can spread the NATO values to other countries too? Thank you.
Thank you.
You're right, a very good question. Indeed, it's NATO members, so allies and partner states. Yeah.
And actually on that, we did get a question from one of our viewers online that was asking more about the advisory board program. Where is it going to be launched? What is the minimum or maximum age of the potential applicants? And again, what will be the dynamics, weekly, monthly meetings?
Weekly is way too much for them, unless they want to dedicate the whole year to NATO. No. So I think monthly is probably much more reasonable. The age group, it's 18 to 30.
18 to 34.
34, yeah, 18 to 34.
Because life begins at 30. Can we agree on that?
Thank you, yeah. So 18 to 34. And what else was the question?
I think that was it, actually. We got the NATO and allies citizenship.
Yes.
Minimum, maximum age. What about any?
Where is it going to be promoted? Sorry.
Yes.
So on social media, yes, we will advertise it probably on November 4th, on everywhere on social media, so that you cannot miss it. But I think if you're in the room, you'll probably also get an email from us to make sure that you get the information. And please do feel free to promote it with your friends, with relevant profiles. And it's only the beginning of something. Yeah.
And any language requirements?
Not really.
Not
Just
yet.
English?
English, okay. We have another question from someone online. How does NATO define a change maker? And how will you empower them to make an impact through the board? And then I would also love for everyone to answer what does it take to be a change maker? Because you all are change makers here. Marie-doha, if you want to begin.
I think it's for you to convince us you're a change maker. We're very open. We don't have any specific definition. I think it has a lot to do with the notion of commitment. You know, if you're personally committed to something and you feel you have something to bring, I think you're someone we need to have with us. And then how do we implement change? That's a good question. How do we achieve something within 1 year? And I think this is a big challenge for us, and I take it for us as a challenge to drive this future board well towards achievable goals so that you can be proud of what you achieved at the end of the year and call one of the projects and one of the implementation fully yours. And I think we can really commit to actually developing and implementing proposals which have been would have been proposed during the year.
Thank you. Sophia, what do you think it takes to be a change maker?
I think to be a change maker, you would need to be open to dialogue with one another. I think being able to change your mind should a new thought come up and you haven't thought about that perspective before, that I think is key to being a change maker. Additionally, I think knowing when to step in the front and lead, and also knowing when to step back and just be one with the team, I think is really important. And I think also just the ability to collaborate with one another. I think those are the three kind of traits that I would attribute to a change maker.
Robin?
Cool. I do think there's some technical capabilities which you bring to the table for sure, but for me those are kind of secondary to a lot of the things that you mentioned. It's about the determination to want to impact things, to make change, right? I think if you have that as part of who you are, that's something that really just translates into what you do. So I think being a change maker is wanting to be a change maker. I think that's the most important thing, in my opinion.
And I think to complement my colleagues who spoke so well, I think you need passion. You need to be passionate about change for the better on behalf of your community, your country, whatever you wish to represent. I think that is a true driving factor that really, really helps.
And I think that's sort of a resounding theme among the YPP and also this board, is that you just have to have passion. I mean, it's not just, there's so many more things that you need to do, and they're both very competitive programs. But I think a key part and a key takeaway for everyone watching and tuning in now is you have to really want it, and you have to really stand for something.
If I can just very quickly, because I think otherwise it doesn't come off as, it comes off as a lie. If you're passionate about something, it won't translate as well. It really has to come from within you, I think.
Any other questions? Yes.
My name is Eric. I am part of the Modern NATO team. I'm more curious about how teenagers can get involved with projects related to NATO, or
Teenagers, yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you. You're showing the way for our next project, which we haven't yet developed.
Always working.
But this is typically a good proposal that could come from that board. And thank you for raising it. Thank you. Right now, we don't really have a project, but thank you.
But also, this will pertain to 18 plus. So, you know, how old are you?
17.
Okay. Well, you're coming up on 18. But also, I mean, I would love to extend to you guys, Robin, I'll start with you. You know, as a teen, what, you know, in hindsight, what can you see as having been helpful to get you where you are today that would help?
Well, I think the path that led me to NATO definitely came from a lot of different things, and one of which is obviously being interested in military and being interested in security, taking an interest in current affairs, and that's something I think that happens organically through your own interests, and I think we should continue letting people develop these interests organically, but be able to be at the end like, oh, if this is what you're interested in, NATO is here. NATO is here to have that dialogue with you, which is what these initiatives that we talked about and potentially will talk about will try to achieve. So I think just like making sure you're there for when people develop that interest, that's what is important to me.
Yeah, I think I very much agree with what Robin said. I think it comes back to having that drive, having that passion to keep going forward. You guys, so many who spoke, like, come from these amazing organizations that already put, you know, you together. I was never a part of any of that, and I think it's great that you get to meet like-minded people who are all interested in things like NATO and come to go here and listen. I think you're all, you know, already on a great path.
I know. Everyone here is already very impressive. And Sophia, I will say that something that a lot of people have been talking about today is networking and the power of networking and creating these small networks that then evolve into big ones, which I think you can start with as young as an early teen. But I would ask, is that something that you have found as well, as the power of networking has benefited your trajectory?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of connections that I've made through internships or informal events like this or conferences that have eventually formed into a long-standing mentorship where I've been able to ask them for advice, whether it be for a career or another life decision. So I think that these sort of events are really important. And so I think, as you had said, for you all to already be here is a great step.
Yes.
Hello, my name is Yusuf. I'm also in the Model NATO organizing team. I want to ask that, supposing that one is accepted in the program while he is still in high school, he or she, does that person need to work full-time on this project or on this program, or should he freeze the university?
No, I hope I made it really clear that we will not ask anyone to work full-time. We will just ask regular touch points and very likely the ability and the desire to work between those touch points among each other. Virtually, remotely, everything is possible. And then once again, it really depends how passionate you are and how ambitious the project is. But no, of course not. And I would even say it's very important that you keep being engaged where you are, because this is how you develop your own skills, and this is also what you're bringing to this organization while you keep growing and meeting and learning. So yes, definitely not a full-time job.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we had the 2 sessions back-to-back, the YPP is full-time. This board will be more complementary and reciprocal in the sense of, you know, it'll benefit NATO, it'll benefit you. So, any other questions? Yes, over here. Thank you, Paul. Paul is going around with his very large mic, which we appreciate. To another question.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Emmanuel. I'm Portuguese. Maybe this is a bit of a complex question, maybe for this panel, but or I'm not sure if it's the more appropriate one. But we are, I don't know, weeks or days away from a potential Donald Trump victory in the United States, and this is a man that has constantly said that he will defund NATO and basically bashed a lot of NATO allies. And in the eventuality that Trump indeed wins the election, how will this affect all of these initiatives that we are discussing here?
I really don't see how this could have an impact on my initiative. This is a NATO initiative, and obviously we work with any allies' government when they're elected, and we're not. This is not a government project. This is, of course, working with civil society directly, working with youth. So, from my perspective, absolutely no impact.
We have another question from a viewer online. Would it be beneficial to invite Ukrainian youth, both from Ukraine and those residing in NATO member countries, to participate in enrichment programs to strengthen Ukraine's ties with NATO?
Are we talking about this program?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So Ukraine is a partner. So absolutely. There are more Ukrainian youth with time to spend on this and interest in this project are more than welcome to apply. Yes.
Great. Love all the interest already. It's very exciting. Any other? Yes.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Miruna, and I'm a member of IATA Romania and also president of Security Studies and World Politics, an NGO which we founded last year in order to promote transatlantic, Euro-Atlantic values and NATO. Through other things. And I was very interested if you have partnerships with NGOs or if you are willing to work with PDD and NGOs in order to promote NATO and these values.
Thank you. This is part of NATO's DNA, and it is indeed delivered by this division, by the engagements team, whose role is really to engage. And I would say it may look like traditional engagement face-to-face, but I would say in today's world where indeed trust is so hard to find and where trust comes from peer recommendation and face-to-face engagement, those missions of my division are more important than ever. So yes, we do this, and we have a certain number of grants, and I can even share with you that, so this year we will be launching call for grants on different topics, one on democracy, one on independent journalism, one on disinformation, one specifically on women, and one on reaching out to NATO's southern neighborhoods. So any project by an NGO that you work with or know of and that would like to make their missions known to us, please do apply.
Yes.
Hello, my name is John. I'm from IATA Turkey chapter. I would like to thank you all for your intervention, and I would like to ask, you said that you were expecting to have around 10 people from 18 to 34 years old. Don't you think that's a huge gap for Youth Advisory Council? The 16 years of difference? Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, once again, when we talk about diversity, I think it's also that. So very happy to have very young colleagues and more mature ones. I think this will work out very well. So I see it as actually an advantage to have this variety. Yeah.
And I would say if you all want to touch as well a little bit on, just over the past couple of years, how you found growth in yourself personally and professionally that would be reflected into this broad of an age range for the advisory board.
I think as part of the Aspen Institute, since a lot of our core is about dialogue, especially nonpartisan dialogue, and also matching generation to generation to have that sort of exchange is really important. So I agree that it is, I think, an advantage to have those generations together in one space to talk about their perspectives, albeit it might be different, but beneficial.
I think it definitely depends on the person, but using myself as an example, my interests have changed every couple of years. I have been able to get into different fields and take those fields and the insights I've gained into different things. So I've worked on aerospace, I've worked on anti-money laundering, I've been into cybersecurity, AI. So all these different fields might seem disparate to you, but I think just being able to take like shared competencies or different types of things which are relevant, and you can bring it into different fields. Like, for example, now in AI, there's a lot of terminology from cybersecurity, which is coming in, like red teaming and stuff, which we've even used here. So like having that kind of insights from different fields are really useful. And I think that's why at different ages, you might get people at different developments or different people with different interests, and that can change. And I think it's valuable to pick these from different people at different times and use these and have that forum where people can talk about it in the youth advisory group, basically.
Definitely. I definitely agree. I think growth happens very, very quickly. And last year, literally, I think 12 months ago, I just started my master's and I was jobless and hopeless almost. And, you know, in the span of 12 months, I have a job. I've been to numerous wonderful conferences and had great conversations. And I think when you're in that age group that we're discussing, these things happen so much and so quickly. But I also think it's a lot about silos, because I think I'm you know, or some people are quite siloed in their spaces. And even something as relevant as Robin is doing, I don't understand it in depth. I can, you know, pretend that I do, but I really don't. And I think bring these people together to have a dialogue, which Sophie mentioned, is an amazing thing.
Yeah, I think that's very well articulated, very well put. And we've all been there, jobless and hopeless. We get it. And I think that once you've experienced something like that, which might come at an earlier age, in 18 or 20, you look for ways that you can feel the most fulfilled later on. So I think that age range will kind of benefit all different facets of what one would hope to get out of this experience. Yes.
Hi again, I have the second question. So a couple of days ago, I was actually chatting with a friend who has no clue about security and defense, but he is expert on strategic communication. So I asked his ideas about NATO's latest tools on the strategic communications and social media usage. His first criticism was, he said that it doesn't look at the public level. So my question is, will this board also be a part of the strategic communication strategy of NATO? And also, will they be collaborating for different social media projects, etc.? So will it be just an advisory board, but also new faces for NATO to show that it actually supports the youth and youth supports this idea?
So the work strands will really depend on the project that they propose, and I don't see why there shouldn't be one youth coming with a StratCom project. Of course, very open to this. This is actually a conversation which we have had in Miami in depth, including with the challenge winners, their perceptions of NATO StratCom. Is it too Hollywood-like? Is it too, I don't know what you mean by public-facing, but does it look too neat? And should it be a little different? Should it be less military, for example? Should it be more political, or should it include a wider array of topics? So yes, we have had this conversation, and this is part of our thinking. We are doing it internally, but of course the whole point of having an advisory board is being open to remarks such as these and being able to digest those inputs and make them impact and steer our own efforts. Yes.
And one final question. Any last questions before we wrap it up? No? Okay, great. Well, we did our job. We answered all the questions, right? Marie-Doha, Sophia, Robin, Marie Magdalena, thank you so much for your perspectives, your expertise. Marie-Doha, thank you for leading the charge on this advisory board that everyone seems to be very, very excited about. And I want to thank you all for earlier staying for the YPP program as well. These are both wonderful programs that NATO wants to instill and promote youth engagement, and that really is what is going to make the world go round. And I think, if anything, diversity of thought promotes change, promotes progress, and I think we learned that today. So I want to thank you all. Thank you for those watching as well for joining today. A round of applause for all of you. Thank you.